The galaxy had never taken humanity seriously. For 300 years, ever since the first alien ships appeared in Earth's skies, humans had been treated like children at a table of adults. The Galactic Concord, an alliance of 12 ancient species, had welcomed Earth into their community with polite smiles and hidden laughter. They gave humanity a seat at their council, but it was a small seat in the back corner where no one important had to listen. Admiral Daniel Carter remembered the day he first understood this truth. He was a young officer then, barely 25 years old, standing at attention while a Velthari diplomat walked past him without even a glance. The alien stood 8 feet tall, covered in hard black shell like a giant insect, and it looked at humans the way humans might look at ants. That memory had stayed with Daniel for 40 years. It had shaped everything he had become. Now he stood at the observation deck of Luna Station, watching the slow dance of cargo ships between Earth and Mars. His hair had turned gray. His face had grown lined with age and worry. But his eyes still held that same fire from 40 years ago. He was waiting for a message that would change everything. The Concorde had placed strict rules on human development. No warships larger than frigates. No weapons more powerful than basic guns. No research into advanced military technology. Earth had agreed to these terms because they had no choice. Humanity was weak, surrounded by species that had traveled the stars for thousands of years. The Concorde offered protection and trade. All they asked in return was that humans stay small and harmless. Most of humanity had accepted this bargain. They built their colonies, traded their goods, and tried not to think about how little respect they received. Politicians gave speeches about cooperation and peace. Diplomats smiled through insults. Earth became known throughout the galaxy as a planet of quiet, obedient creatures who knew their place. But not everyone had accepted this fate. Deep beneath the Nevada desert, hidden under miles of rock and sand, there was a facility that appeared on no map. It had no name that anyone spoke aloud. The people who worked there had been chosen for their skill, their loyalty, and their ability to keep secrets. 3 generations of engineers, scientists, and soldiers had lived and died in that underground world, all working toward a single goal. They called it Project Stormfront. Lisa Monroe was the project's lead engineer, the latest in a long line of brilliant minds who had dedicated their lives to this work. She was 43 years old, with tired eyes and hands that shook slightly from too much coffee and too little sleep. Her grandmother had been one of the original engineers on the project. Her mother had continued the work. Now Lisa was finishing what they had started. She stood in the main hangar, looking up at the thing they had built. It was enormous, stretching nearly 4 kilometers from bow to stern. Its hull was made of materials that human science had not been able to create until 30 years ago. Its engines used principles that the Concorde believed impossible. Its weapons were the stuff of nightmares. The Hurricane-class battleship was humanity's greatest secret. Lisa pulled out her communicator and typed a message to Admiral Carter. Her fingers trembled slightly as she wrote just 2 words: "She's ready." On Luna Station, Daniel received the message and felt his heart skip a beat. He had waited his entire career for this moment. He had watched humanity bow and scrape before alien powers. He had attended funerals for human colonists killed by alien raiders while the Concorde looked away. He had smiled at diplomats who treated him like a pet. All of that was about to end. He thought about the history that had led to this moment. When the first alien ships arrived 3 centuries ago, humanity had been terrified. The Velthari Dominion had wanted to simply take Earth as a colony, harvesting its resources and enslaving its people. Only the intervention of the other Concorde species had stopped them. The elder races did not save humanity out of kindness. They simply did not want the Velthari to become too powerful. Earth was given protection as a way of maintaining balance. Humanity learned quickly that they were not allies of the Concord. They were pawns, tools, convenient pieces in a game played by ancient powers. The restrictions on human military development were not about keeping peace. They were about keeping humanity weak and controllable. But humanity had a gift that the alien species had never understood. Humans were patient. Humans could plan for generations. Humans could smile and nod while building something terrible in secret. Project Stormfront had begun just 50 years after first contact. A small group of military leaders and scientists had looked at the galaxy and seen the truth. Peace would not last forever. One day, some alien power would decide that humanity was worth destroying. When that day came, Earth needed to be ready. They started small. A hidden laboratory here. A secret research station there. They studied every piece of alien technology they could get their hands on. They reverse-engineered crash probes and stolen equipment. They asked questions that seemed innocent and filed away every answer. The first generation built the foundation. The second generation developed the theories. The third generation created the impossible. Daniel walked to his private office and locked the door behind him. He sat down at his desk and stared at the wall for a long moment. Tomorrow, he would begin the process of revealing humanity's secret to the galaxy. The process would be delicate. It could not look like aggression. It had to look like defense. He needed a reasoned dot, as if the universe had heard his thoughts. An alert flashed on his screen. A Valkyrie fleet had been spotted moving toward the Kepler system. Intelligence reports suggested they were planning something big. Daniel read the reports with growing interest. The Kepler system was home to 3 million human colonists. It was also sitting on mineral deposits that the Valkyrie desperately wanted. The Concord had ruled decades ago that the system belonged to humanity, but the Valkyrie had never accepted that decision. They had been waiting for an opportunity. It seemed that opportunity had come. Daniel leaned back in his chair and allowed himself a small smile. He did not wish harm on those colonists. He would do everything in his power to protect them. But he also recognized what this situation meant. The Valkyrie were about to give humanity the perfect excuse to show the galaxy what they had been building. The ancient powers thought they knew what humans were capable of. They thought 300 years was not enough. Time to create anything dangerous. They were about to learn how wrong they were. Daniel picked up his communicator and began making calls. It was time to wake up the sleeping giant. The message arrived at dawn on a Tuesday morning. Every screen on every human world displayed the same image. The face of High Counselor Zethral of the Valkyrie Dominion. His species looked like insects that had grown to monstrous size. Hard black shells covered their bodies. Multiple eyes glittered with cold intelligence. Mandibles clicked as they spoke in a language that translation software turned into harsh, clipped words. Zethral did not bother with pleasantries. He announced that the Kepler system had always belonged to the Valkyrie Dominion. He said that the human colonies there were illegal settlements on sovereign Valkyrie territory. He declared that humanity had 30 standard days to evacuate all 3 million colonists from the system. If they refused, the Valkyrie would remove them by force. The broadcast ended. Across human space, there was silence. Then came the panic. Commander Kevin Grant was stationed aboard the patrol vessel Franklin, orbiting Kepler 442b when the announcement came. His ship was small, barely larger than an ancient sailing vessel, armed with weapons that could not scratch a Valkyrie warship. He had a crew of 40 men and women who had signed up for peaceful patrol duty, not war. Kevin gathered his crew in the mess hall and played the broadcast again. He watched their faces as they listened. Some looked scared. Some looked angry. A few looked like they might cry. Kevin understood all of these reactions. He felt them himself. "What do we do, sir?" asked his second officer, a young woman named Maria Santos. She was 26 years old, fresh out of the academy, still believing that the galaxy was a fair place. Kevin did not have an answer for her. He looked out the window at the planet below. 3 million people lived down there. Farmers who had turned alien soil into productive land. Miners who pulled valuable minerals from deep underground. Families who had built homes and schools and communities. They had come to Kepler believing they would be safe. They had trusted that humanity's agreements with the Concord would protect them. That trust was about to be broken. On Earth, the United Nations convened an emergency session. Representatives from every nation argued and shouted and demanded action. But what action could they take? Humanity had no fleet capable of facing the Volturi. Their frigates were toys compared to Volturi warships. Their weapons were jokes. Ambassador Amy Bishop was given the task of pleading before the Galactic Concord. She was 52 years old, a career diplomat who had spent her life trying to build bridges between humanity and the elder species. She had always believed in cooperation. She had always trusted that reason would prevail. She stood before the Concord Assembly and spoke from her heart. She reminded them of the treaties that protected the Kepler system. She cited laws and precedents and agreements. She spoke of the 3 million innocent lives at stake. She asked, begged, pleaded for the Concord to intervene. The elder species listened politely. They nodded their heads and made sympathetic noises. Then they did nothing. Representative after representative explained why they could not help. The Volturi were too powerful to challenge. The treaties were unclear on this specific situation. Their own people would not support a war over human colonies. There were many excuses, all of them dressed up in diplomatic language, but they all meant the same thing. 3 million human lives were not worth the trouble. Amy returned to Earth feeling hollow inside. She had given everything she had, and it had not been enough. She had trusted in the system, and the system had failed. For the first time in her career, she began to wonder if everything she believed was wrong. President Christopher Hall addressed the world that evening. He spoke from the Oval Office, sitting behind a desk that had witnessed centuries of American history. He was 60 years old, with silver hair and a face that had aged rapidly in recent months. The weight of leadership pressed down on him like a physical force. He began by explaining the situation calmly and clearly. He told the world about the Volturi ultimatum. He explained that evacuation was impossible. There were not enough ships to move 3 million people in 30 days. There was nowhere for them to go even if there were ships. The Volturi knew this. The ultimatum was not a warning. It was a death sentence. Then the president paused. He looked directly into the camera, and his eyes held something that had not been there before. It was not fear. It was not despair. It was something harder, something older, something that humanity had buried for 300 years. For 3 centuries, he said, humanity has been a peaceful member of the galactic community. We have followed the rules. We have respected the treaties. We have asked only to be left alone to build our future among the stars. He leaned forward slightly. But we are not sheep waiting for the slaughter. We are not children who will accept whatever fate is handed to us. We are human beings, and we will defend our own. Across the world, people stopped what they were doing to listen. Something in the president's voice had changed. Something important was happening. I have authorized the deployment of assets that have been held in reserve for precisely this kind of situation. To the Volturi Dominion I say this, turn back now. Leave our people in peace. If you do not, you will discover that humanity is not what you think we are. The broadcast ended. Immediately, questions exploded across every news network. What assets? What reserves? Everyone knew that humanity had no military power worth mentioning. The president must be bluffing. Deep beneath Nevada, Lisa Monroe watched the address with tears in her eyes. She knew what was coming. The ship she had spent her entire life building was about to fly. The secret her family had kept for 3 generations was about to be revealed. She turned to her team. Hundreds of engineers and technicians stood in the massive hangar, looking up at the vessel that would change everything. The USS Tempest waited in silence, her hull gleaming under artificial lights, her weapons cold and ready. "You heard the president," Lisa said. Her voice echoed through the hangar. "It is time to show the galaxy what we have built. It is time to let them know what humanity can do." The hangar erupted in cheers. After a century of secrecy, after 3 generations of silent work, humanity was finally going to reveal its true face to the stars. The Valkyrie had made a terrible mistake. They had assumed that humans were weak because they acted weak. They had forgotten the most important lesson of history. The most dangerous creatures are not the ones who show their teeth. They are the ones who hide them until the perfect moment to bite. The Nevada desert was silent under a blanket of stars. Nothing moved on the surface. No buildings, no roads, no signs of human presence. To anyone watching from above, it would look like empty wasteland stretching to the horizon. But beneath that empty sand, something incredible was happening. Massive doors hidden under the desert floor began to slide open. They had not moved in 50 years, not since the last components of the Tempest had been lowered into the underground hangar. Sand poured down into the growing opening, revealing lights that seemed impossibly bright after decades of darkness. Captain Nicole Burns stood on the bridge of her ship and felt the vibrations of those doors opening. After 20 years of training, after countless simulations and exercises, the moment had finally arrived. She was about to take the most powerful warship in human history into battle. Nicole was 45 years old. She had joined the Navy at 18, convinced she would spend her career commanding patrol boats and cargo escorts. That changed when a recruiter with no name and no official rank pulled her aside after a training exercise. He had seen something in her: leadership, courage, the ability to make impossible decisions under pressure. He had told her about Project Stormfront. He had shown her the plans for the Hurricane-class battleship. He had asked if she was willing to dedicate her life to a secret she could never share, preparing for a battle that might never come. She had said yes, without hesitation. Now she looked around her bridge at the crew she had handpicked and trained. 6,000 men and women served aboard the Tempest. Every single one of them had been recruited the same way she had. They were the best humanity had to offer, sworn to secrecy, ready to die for their species. Her first officer, Patrick Stone, approached her station. He was a large man with steady hands and a calm voice that never rose above a conversational level. Nicole had chosen him precisely for that steadiness. In the chaos of battle, Patrick would be her anchor. "All departments report ready, Captain," he said. "Engineering confirms engines at full capacity. Weapon systems are online and charged. The crew is at battle stations." Nicole nodded. "Time until the hangar doors are fully open?" 12 minutes. 12 minutes until the world changed forever. Nicole took a deep breath and looked at the main view screen. It showed a camera feed from outside the ship, a view of the massive hangar that had been the Tempest's home for so long. The ship itself was a thing of terrible beauty. Nearly 4 kilometers long, she dwarfed anything the Galactic Concorde had ever built. Her hull was covered in materials that absorbed sensor scans, making her nearly invisible to alien detection systems. Her engines could accelerate her to speeds that the elder species believed were impossible. Her armor could withstand weapons that would vaporize ordinary warships, but it was her weapons that made her truly special. While the Concorde species had focused on energy shields and plasma weapons, humanity had taken a different path. The Tempest carried railguns that could accelerate metal projectiles to a significant fraction of light speed. At those velocities, Even a small piece of metal carried the energy of a nuclear weapon. She carried missiles equipped with phase technology that allowed them to pass through energy shields as if they were not there. She carried gravity weapons that could crush enemy ships, like paper cups. Every piece of this technology had been developed in secret. Some of it came from studying alien equipment. Some of it came from human ingenuity and desperation. All of it had been refined and perfected over a century of hidden work. Lisa Monroe's voice came through the bridge speakers. She was still in the engineering section, monitoring the ship systems as they came fully online. "Captain, I am reading green across the board. She is performing beautifully." "Thank you, Lisa," Nicole replied. "Your grandmother and mother would be proud." There was a moment of silence from the engineering section. When Lisa spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. "I know they would. They gave their lives for this ship. I intend to make sure their sacrifice was worth it." The hangar doors finished opening. Above the Tempest, stars became visible for the first time since her construction began. Nicole gave the order, and the great engines roared to life. The ship rose slowly at first, climbing up through the opening in the desert floor. Sand cascaded off her hull like water. She emerged into the night air, vast and dark against the star-filled sky. Anyone watching would have thought they were seeing some kind of impossible dream. Then the main engines engaged, and the Tempest shot upward with acceleration that should have crushed everyone aboard. But the internal gravity systems held firm, and the crew felt only a gentle push as their ship climbed toward space. Nicole watched Earth shrinking below them. She thought about the 3 million people in the Kepler system, waiting for salvation or death. She thought about the Valkyrie fleet that was even now preparing to destroy them. She thought about her crew, her ship, and the responsibility she carried. "Set course for the Kepler system," she ordered. "Maximum speed." Patrick relayed the command, and the Tempest turned toward the stars. Her faster-than-light engines engaged, bending space itself around her hull. In moments, Earth was gone, replaced by the strange, blurred light of transit space. They would reach Kepler in 2 days. The Valkyrie fleet was already there, surrounding the human colonies with 47 warships. Intelligence reports said they were waiting for the deadline to expire before beginning their attack. They wanted humanity to know that they had failed, that no help was coming, that their people would die alone and abandoned. The Valkyrie were about to receive a surprise. Nicole sat in her command chair and reviewed the tactical data one more time. 47 enemy ships against 1. Any sane commander would call those odds impossible. But Nicole had seen what the Tempest could do in simulations. She had trained her crew until they could operate this ship in their sleep. The Valkyrie had numbers. But humanity had spent a century preparing for this exact moment. They had poured every ounce of genius, every drop of determination, every spark of hope into creating the perfect weapon. 2 days from now, the galaxy would learn what that weapon could do. Nicole closed her eyes and allowed herself a moment of rest. When she opened them again, she would need to be ready for war. But for now, she simply sat in silence, listening to the hum of her ship's engines, feeling the vibration of faster-than-light travel. The Tempest raced through the void, carrying the hopes of 3 million souls and the secrets of 100 years. The stars blurred past her windows like streaks of light. And somewhere ahead, the Valkyrie waited, confident in their power, certain of their victory. They had no idea what was coming for them. Fleet Commander Vethkai stood on the bridge of his flagship and watched the human evacuation ships crawling through space. They were so slow, so helpless. His mandibles clicked together in what passed for laughter among his species. The humans were trying to save as many of their kind as possible before the deadline expired, but their efforts were pathetic. 40-7 Valkyrie warships surrounded the Kepler system like a net of death. Each one was armed with plasma cannons that could burn through metal like fire through paper. Each one carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon. Together, they represented the mightiest force the Velthari had assembled in 100 years. Vethkai had commanded fleets for 60 years. He had crushed rebellions on a dozen worlds. He had never lost a battle, never faced an enemy that could challenge Velthari supremacy. These humans would be no different. They were soft creatures with short lives and weak bodies. They had no warships, no weapons, no hope. The deadline was 12 hours away. Vethkai planned to begin firing the moment it expired. He would start with the evacuation ships, let the colonists on the planet below watch their last hope of escape burn. Then he would bombard the settlements from orbit. It would take perhaps 3 days to eliminate all human presence from the system. A minor operation, really. Barely worth his attention. His sensor officer made a sound of confusion. "Commander, we are detecting something strange." Vethkai turned. "Explain." "An object just emerged from faster-than-light travel behind the fourth moon. It is... I do not understand these readings. Show me." The main view screen shifted to display the sensor data. Vethkai stared at the image without comprehension. The object was enormous, nearly 4 kilometers long. It was larger than any warship in the galaxy. But that was impossible. The Concorde had strict rules about ship sizes. No species was allowed to build anything so massive. "Identify that vessel," Vethkai commanded. His officers worked frantically at their stations. After several minutes, they reported back with troubled voices. The vessel matched no known design in their databases. Its hull was absorbing most of their sensor scans, making detailed analysis impossible. They could not even determine what species had built it. Then a transmission came through on all frequencies. A human voice, calm and clear. "Velthari Fleet. This is the USS Tempest of the United Earth Navy. You have threatened the lives of 3 million human beings. You have 30 seconds to withdraw from this system. This is your only warning." Vethkai's multiple eyes widened. A human ship? This enormous thing was human? Impossible. The humans had no military capability. They were limited to patrol frigates and cargo vessels. They could not have built something like this without the Concorde knowing. He laughed again, a harsh clicking sound that echoed across his bridge. The humans were bluffing. This ship must be some kind of illusion, a desperate trick to buy time. 1 vessel against 47. Even if it was real, it could not survive against his fleet. "All ships, attack formation," he ordered. "Destroy that vessel." The Velthari fleet moved with practiced precision. Plasma cannons charged with deadly energy. Missile tubes opened. 47 warships turned their weapons toward a single target and prepared to fire. The Tempest did not run. She did not try to hide. She simply waited. Captain Nicole Burns watched the enemy fleet approaching on her view screen. Her crew was silent, focused, ready. They had trained for this moment for years. Every drill, every simulation, every sleepless night had led to this. "Weapons free," she said quietly. "Show them what we can do." The battle lasted 11 minutes. Witnesses would later struggle to describe what they saw. The human evacuation ships, expecting to die, recorded everything and sent the footage back to Earth. The Tempest's railguns fired first. Projectiles, accelerated to speeds that defied belief, crossed the distance between ships in the blink of an eye. They struck Velthari shields and punched through as if the shields were not there. The first 3 warships died before anyone understood what was happening. They simply exploded, their hulls torn apart by kinetic impacts carrying more energy than nuclear warheads. Vethkai screamed orders, but his fleet was already in chaos. They fired everything they had at the human ship. Plasma bolts splashed against the Tempest's hull and did nothing. Missiles detonated against her armor without leaving a mark. The technologies they had relied upon for centuries were useless. The Tempest moved through the Valkyrie formation like a predator through a flock of birds. Her weapons fired continuously. Railgun rounds tore through ships. Phase missiles appeared inside enemy vessels, bypassing shields entirely before detonating. Gravity weapons crushed warships into twisted metal. One by one, the Valkyrie warships died. Ships that had conquered worlds. Ships that had terrorized species across the galaxy. They burned and broke apart, their crews never understanding what was killing them. Vethkai watched his fleet being destroyed and felt something he had never experienced before. Fear. Real, deep, paralyzing fear. 30 of his ships were gone. Then 35. Then 40. The human vessel sailed through the wreckage without slowing down, her weapons still firing, her hull unmarked by a single hit. His flagship was the last survivor. Vethkai's officers were dead or dying around him. Fires burned across his bridge. Alarms screamed warnings that no longer mattered. He looked at the view screen and saw the Tempest bearing down on him. She was vast and dark, blocking out the stars behind her. Her weapons were pointed directly at his ship. "No," he whispered. His mandibles clicked frantically. "This is not possible. You are humans. You are nothing." Captain Nicole Burns heard his words through the open communication channel. She felt no pleasure in what she was about to do. No joy in the killing. Only a cold satisfaction that justice was being served. "We were never nothing," she replied. "We were just waiting." The Tempest railguns fired one last time. Vethkai's flagship came apart in a flash of light and fire. The commander who had planned to murder 3 million humans died without ever understanding what had happened. Silence fell over the Kepler system. 47 Valkyrie warships had been reduced to floating debris in 11 minutes. The evacuation ships hung motionless in space, their crews too shocked to move. On the planet below, 3 million colonists stared at their screens in disbelief. Nicole let out a long breath. Her hands were shaking slightly. She had just killed thousands of beings. She had just started a new chapter in galactic history. She was not sure how to feel about any of it. "Signal the evacuation ships," she ordered. Her voice was steady despite her trembling hands. "Tell them they are safe. Tell them they can stay." Patrick Stone relayed the message. After a moment, responses began flooding in. Cries of joy, prayers of thanks, disbelief that anyone had come to save them. The Tempest sailed through the debris field of what had been the mightiest Valkyrie fleet in a century. Her hull was unmarked. Her weapons were still hot. Her crew was alive, and the galaxy would never be the same again. The news spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Every species with faster-than-light communication heard the story within hours. A human ship had destroyed 47 Valkyrie warships in 11 minutes. Not damaged. Not driven away. Destroyed utterly, leaving nothing but debris floating in the void. At first, no one believed it. The reports must be exaggerated. Human propaganda designed to create fear. The Valkyrie were among the most powerful military forces in the Concord. They could not have been defeated so easily, so completely, by a single vessel from a species everyone considered weak and primitive. Then the footage arrived. Clear, detailed recordings from the human evacuation ships showed everything. The massive warship emerging from behind the moon. The Valkyrie fleet opening fire with everything they had. The complete failure of their weapons to damage the enemy. And then the slaughter, as human guns tore through ships like they were made of paper. The Galactic Concord called an emergency session. Representatives from all 12 elder species gathered in the Great Assembly Hall, their faces showing various expressions of shock, fear, and disbelief. They had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. They had believed they understood the balance of power. Now that understanding lay shattered at their feet, Admiral Daniel Carter addressed the assembly in person. He had traveled from Earth on a fast courier ship, arriving just as the session began. He walked to the central platform without bowing, without any of the humble gestures that human representatives had always made before. He stood tall and looked around at the beings who had treated his species like children for 300 years. "I know you have questions," he said. His voice was calm and even. "I will answer some of them. Others must remain classified for the security of my people." The Velthari representative, a senior diplomat named Kethtal, rose to speak. His species was in shock. They had just lost an entire fleet to a species they considered beneath notice. "How is this possible?" he demanded. "You were limited. You had no military capability. We would have known if you were building such weapons." Daniel allowed himself a small smile. "For 300 years, humanity accepted your limitations. We smiled while you called us primitive. We bowed while you dismissed our potential. But we never stopped working. We never stopped building. We never stopped dreaming." He pressed a button on the podium, and a holographic image appeared above him. It showed the Tempest in all her terrible glory, her massive hull bristling with weapons that the Concorde had never imagined. "The Tempest is not our only Hurricane-class vessel," Daniel continued. "There are more, many more. They have been built in secret shipyards across human space. They are crewed by men and women who have trained for this moment their entire lives." The assembly fell into stunned silence. Not one ship. Not a desperate gamble. An entire fleet of these monsters, hidden where no one had thought to look. "We did not build these ships to conquer," Daniel said. "We built them to survive." We looked at the galaxy and saw that weakness invites destruction. We saw how the Concorde protected us not out of friendship, but out of convenience. We knew that someday, some power would decide that humanity was worth destroying. He paused and let his words sink in. We were right. Ambassador Amy Bishop watched from the human delegation section with tears in her eyes. She had spent her career believing in cooperation and diplomacy. She had trusted that reason would prevail. The Velthari crisis had shown her how naive that trust had been. But seeing Daniel stand before the assembly, seeing the respect and fear in alien eyes, she began to understand a harder truth. Peace required strength. Cooperation required the ability to refuse. Diplomacy only worked when the other side knew the war was not a safe option. Daniel concluded his address with words that would be remembered for centuries. Humanity seeks no empire. We want only to live in peace, to raise our children, to build our future among the stars. But we will defend what is ours. We will protect our people. Any species that threatens human lives will face the full power of what we have created. He looked directly at the Velthari representative. The Kepler system belongs to humanity. This is not a request. This is not a negotiation. This is a statement of fact. Accept it, or face the consequences. Kethtal said nothing. What could he say? His species had just witnessed the destruction of their finest fleet. The humans had proven that they could back up their words with fire and steel. The Concorde session ended without any official declaration. But everyone understood that the galaxy had changed forever. Humanity was no longer a minor species to be tolerated and controlled. Humanity was a power to be respected and perhaps feared. On the Tempest, Captain Nicole Burns stood at her observation window and watched the stars drift past. Her ship was returning to Earth at a leisurely pace, giving the crew time to rest after the stress of battle. They had done the impossible. They have saved 3 million lives and changed the course of history. Patrick Stone joined her at the window. He stood in silence for a long moment before speaking. "Do you think this will bring peace?" Nicole considered the question carefully. I think it will bring a different kind of peace. The kind where no one attacks us because they know what will happen if they do. Is that better? I do not know, she admitted. But it is honest. The Concord always saw us as weak. They protected us because it suited them, not because they cared about human lives. At least now we know where we stand. They watched the stars together. Somewhere out there, other human ships were emerging from their hiding places. The Hurricane-class fleet was revealing itself to the galaxy, ship by massive ship. Engineers and crews who had worked in secret for decades were finally able to show the universe what they had accomplished. On Earth, celebrations erupted in every city. People danced in the streets and wept with joy. For 300 years, they had lived under the shadow of alien powers. They had accepted limitations and swallowed their pride. Now they could finally stand tall. In the Nevada facility, Lisa Monroe stood in the empty hangar where the Tempest had been built. The space seemed impossibly large without the ship filling it. She thought about her grandmother, who had worked on the project's earliest designs. She thought about her mother, who had solved the engineering problems that made the weapons possible. They had given their lives to a dream they would never see completed. Lisa wiped tears from her eyes and smiled. The dream was real now. The ship flew among the stars. Humanity had finally come of age. Far above, the Tempest sailed through the darkness of space. Her hull gleamed in the light of distant suns. Her weapons were cold and quiet, waiting for the next threat that might never come. The stars watched her pass, and they remembered. They would remember forever. Humanity had announced itself to the galaxy. The message was written in fire and steel. We are here, we are strong, and we will never be victims again. The children of Earth had grown up, and nothing in the universe would ever make them bow again.